This video focuses on what we call text boxes in Microsoft Word. The reason we have a video for this in particular is because the new Lloyd's documents use text boxes a lot, pretty much on every single page. So it's important to know some simple ways to edit them. First of all, we've got a blank Word document here. What we'll do is insert a new text box. So I'll go to Insert and I'll click on Text Box. I'll just choose the basic text box to insert, which is the one that we use in the Lloyd's documents. So I'll click that, and you can see that this text box can now be moved around. Text boxes, like any element, will butt up against other elements on the page by default. So if I have a bit of text here, and if I move this text box around by dragging on it, you can see that the text moves to adjust it. Now, that's okay, but for the purpose that we use text boxes, it's not very useful to have it moving other elements around the page. It makes it quite messy, because if we have two text boxes, you can see it's going to get quite messy on the page. And if we also use images, they're all going to collide. What we want to do, whenever we insert a new text box, we want to right-click on that text box and click More Layout Options. This will give us a pop-up window, and the very important option we want to choose is to not move object with text. So we untick that option. We don't want to move the object with the text, we want it to be independent of text. Allow overlap, that can remain ticked, so that's fine. And also under text wrapping, under that heading there, we can choose how we want it to wrap with the text, and we'll select in front of text. So our text box will sit on top of any other text on the page. So having made those two changes, unticking move object with text, and on the text wrapping page making the element in front of the text, if we click OK, we can see that this text box is now much more movable. We've got a lot more maneuverability of this text box without it interfering with other elements on the page. So we'll do the same with this text box, because we haven't changed that one. That's still moving the text. We'll right click on it, go to More Layout Options, untick that option, Move Object with Text, and under the text wrapping, click that it will sit in front of the text, and click OK. So now we have two text boxes that are completely independent to anything on the page, and it makes it really easy to position, because we can position this right up in the corner, we can make it big, we can make it small, and it's not impacting other elements on the page. By default, all the text boxes that are in the Lloyd's templates already have these formatting options applied to them. So you won't have to go through and do this on every page. The only time you'll ever have to choose those options is if you add a new text box, as we did, via Insert, Text Box, and by choosing this option here. If you do insert a text box, it's important not to have a text box already selected. You can see I've clicked on this text box and that's got it selected, because we can see the boundary box around it. If I now click on inserting another text box, it's going to insert it inside this one. So to deselect that text box, we just click outside the page into this grey area, and you'll see that deselects the text box. So with nothing selected, we can now insert a text box onto the page, and then we can apply those formatting options. The reason why we use text box in the new documents is that they're really easy to move around and to format. For example, to move it around, all you have to do is drag on the edge and it can go anywhere on the page. The other way you can move it around, as we learnt in the previous tutorial, is if you want to get it exactly precise in a position, you can use the arrow keys, the up, down, and left and right arrow keys that are on your keyboard. And doing this can get it right up to the edge of the page, like that. Okay, so we've got two text boxes. Now what if we want to format them? Well, if we right click and choose Format Shape, notice what happens to the menu on the right hand side of the screen. You'll notice that it changed. And now we have some formatting options specific to the text box. For example, we can fill the text box with a color. If we want to fill it with a solid fill, by default the solid fill is white, which is why when we move it over another element, you don't see the other element coming through because this is filled with a white color. We can change that color to any other color we want. We can also make that background transparent. At the moment, the background has 0% transparency, but watch as I slide this up to 100%. Okay, we start to see the background showing through. And if I make it completely 100%, now the background is completely transparent. You can see the previous text coming through. So what you'll find is a lot of the text boxes in our documents, they have a background of maybe black, and they have not 100% transparency, but they have a transparency around about 20%, so that it's clearly distinguished from the background. To format the text within a text box, all we need to do is select that text and then change the text color as we would normally in the document. So we can select that text, we can make it yellow for example, right click on the text box itself, go to Format Shape, and then under the Fill bucket, click Solid Fill, choose our color, let's make it green for something really gaudy to demonstrate the point. And if we don't want any transparency, make the transparency 0. Or if we just want a little bit of transparency, we can just slide that up to say 12%. Sometimes in the Word documents that you'll be editing, the background isn't a solid color, but rather it's a picture. So we can choose Picture, and then we can choose the file that we want to be the background. So we'll select File, and from our computer we'll select one of the images that I've downloaded. So for example, the horse image. So now the background of this text box is the horse image. If I adjust the size of this text box, you'll notice that the image automatically fills the size of the text box. So I would want to keep this text box roughly to scale of the image, otherwise I'm going to make it look squashed and distorted. But I can make it bigger or smaller as long as I keep that rough proportion correct. Now the other thing we may want to do with text boxes is you'll notice that the text is getting quite close to the edge. And from a design perspective, that doesn't look that great. So what we may want to do is increase the margin of space that's around this text. To do that, you'll notice on the right hand side, there's an option called Layout and Properties. We'll click on that and we'll expand the text box option. And now we have left margin, right margin, top margin, and bottom margin. If we just click on the arrow to increase these margins, let's say we increase them all to 1 centimeter. You'll see that there's much more space around the text now, which looks nicer from a design perspective. If we go back to the bucket icon and choose Solid Fill and Black, and if we change this text to white, you'll start to see how the text that's in the final document will look. These controls probably account for about 80 to 90% of the editing functionality that you'll use in the new documents. So become familiar with these options. Right-clicking on the text box, go to Format Shape, and then you have the background fill, either solid or a picture, and the transparency. And you also have the margins around the text. This is the margin above and to the side of the text. By default, all these settings will be preset for you in the templates. So you don't have to go through and set this all up yourself. But it's important to understand where these options are because you may want to adjust them. Or you may periodically need to add new elements to a page or even add a new page itself. So you'll need to know how to insert these elements onto the page and then how to change the settings of them to get the desired outcome. Like any activity, the more that you use this and practice these options, the quicker you'll get. For myself, it's second nature now. I don't even have to think about it. In about 5 seconds, it's formatted. And I'm sure it'll be the same for you. With a bit of practice, this will become second nature and you'll be able to use this not just in Lloyd's documents, but in any Word document. These skills are transferable and you'll use words so often that you'll really find other applications for these options, not just editing the Lloyd's documents. So let's quickly do an example. We'll format some text boxes similar to what's in the information memorandum. I'll get rid of this text that's on the page here. And we'll start from a blank slate. So we'll insert a new text box. I'll type in some text. We'll right click on the text box, go to More Layout Options, untick that, and choose In Front of Text. So that gives us our ability to move it around freely. Then I'll right click and go Format Shape. I want a solid fill. I want the background to be black. And I want some transparency. So I'll move up the transparency slider. Now I'm not happy with the margins, so I'll click on this Layout and Properties button and I'll increase the margin to 1 centimeter. Now, I'll Control C to copy and I'll Control V to paste. And I'll use the arrow keys to adjust the positioning in a precise manner. Now, I'll Control C and I'll Control V to get another text box. And I'll move that here. I'll get rid of this text and I'll type in heading 1. And now I'll reduce the size of that text box. You can see the margins are too big, it looks a bit funny. So I'll right click and go Format Shape, click on Layout Properties and decrease the margins just a bit. So now that looks more like a heading box. I'll right click, go Format Shape and choose an alternative color. You'll notice that there's an outline, a black outline. If we right click and go Format Shape, there's an option here for line. So at the moment we've got a black line, but I'll just click No Line. I don't want a line on the box, and you'll see that that black outline is gone. I'll Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And now we've got a layout that's very similar to a lot of the pages in the information memorandum. And I can move these around by holding down the Shift key and selecting multiple boxes, and then I can drag them all around together on the page.